They agreed to collaborate with Nest in developing a new program. Now, a complicating factor in all of this was that this was now the spring of 2020, and we were in the depths of COVID quarantine, so the program would have to be virtual as well. And, neither of Paula's nor Nicolette's programs had been virtual, so this was a whole new learning curve for everybody. Well, in record time, a storytelling coaching and mentoring model named FLY, which stands for Folktales, Life Tales, and Youth, was born, and the 6-week pilot session was launched in June. So what happened next? Well, you're about to see a video that was produced by Deb and Mark Rowe that will describe the program and provide insights from the coaches, mentors, as well as from the participants themselves. And then following the video, Paula Weiss will introduce our panel, who will start the discussion, answer your questions, and talk about plans for future editions of FLY.
Hi, my name is Ayah Osman, and I absolutely adore being a FLY storytelling coach.
The mission of the FLY program is guiding young people to find their voice and learn to create an effective message through the art of storytelling. The FLY program seeks to help young people discover the language and confidence to express their deep concerns.
Hi everybody, I'm Nisha, and today I'll be telling a personal story of how I broke out of my bubble.
I'm gonna tell a story that really was so hard. In Jordan was it's a different from here.
The FLY program helped them gain insight into the rich diversity of the world by exploring traditional tales and how they relate to contemporary messages and issues they care about most.
The storyteller then said that there are times when you must be like the wise man, hearing advice that people tell you and keeping them in your heart forever to remember. Then there are times when you must be like the fool, hearing things and then forgetting about them right away.
The third night we slept. The walls started shaking, the windows started clinking, there was knocking at the door and thumping on the roof. Now Thomas was pretty creeped out.
And provide experiences, tools, and skills to enable them to become leaders at school, in their communities, and eventually in the workplace. Through storytelling, FLY creates a community of encouragement for young people to find and test their voice and wings and learn to support each other through the process.
It gives me the greatest pleasure to watch a student take hold of their story, grow it, pace it, and use tempo, build in rising action, and then they tell it to an audience, and the audience is blown away.
It helps participants uncover issues that are important to them and guides them to find stories to express their feelings.
In stories, there's a kind of truth with a capital T. It's not necessarily facts. It's not necessarily exactly what happened, but there's a truth in it if we can let ourselves inside that story that we chose, that we like, because it feels important in some way to us.
FLY's practical outcomes have been identified as crucial 21st century skills, such as creativity, collaboration, communication, technological literacy, flexibility, leadership, social skills, and initiative. FLY results in social and emotional learning. It creates and strengthens bonds of friendship.
We all came together from different places.
When I first came into this program, I was kind of shy, but now I have that confidence in me.
This really helped me because it really got me used to a lot of people.
And it was just good to hear other people's stories and hear their progress.
I'm sure it's going to be helpful in my future.
That was the best thing, seeing their confidence grow in this new role of storyteller.
Isn't that just delightful? And a little later, after our panel, I think you're going to actually get to hear 2 of our storytellers tell their stories, which will be even more exciting. But now I want to introduce Paula and she will begin our discussion.
Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, that video really came out well. Nest Executive Director Deborah and her husband made that video, and we were just so thrilled with it. It really shows off what I'm going to call the beautiful duck of the fly program, as it's swimming across a lake with the sun shining and the wind ruffling its feathers. And I'm going to give you a little peek at the webbed feet underneath that lake, paddling and paddling to make it go. So as Lynn explained, in mid-April, I was approached by the Nest board, and then they put me together with Nicolette, who has the Stories in the Streets program in Massachusetts. And the two of us put our heads together and met a couple of times with Lynn and Deb, and put this program together. And it had to be done fast because we determined that the end of June was really the best time to launch, to get the kids as they were coming, before they really started a summer vacation and just as the school year was ending. So to introduce myself a little more, I am the co-founder and the director of the Children at the Well program in the Capital Region of New York. And our last few weeks of our 2020 season, actually, we did go online. Story coaches Marni and Ayah Osman, who are here today, led the story coaching sessions online along with Varun Mondaika, who's not here. He's in college. So is Ayah. And so we had a little bit of experience, but the whole program wasn't planned that way for sure. And through numerous emails, Zoom sessions, phone calls, Nicolette and I put together details such as the time frame, how many weeks was it going to be, how long were the sessions going to be, how many sessions per week, who were going to be the story coaches, what were the qualifications we were looking for, how are we going to find participants. We assembled the goals, the mission, the vision of the program, the name of the program, and an outline of lesson plans and that kind of thing. And we put together documents, release forms for photos, correspondence with the kids. We asked them all to write us a letter or a note saying why they wanted to learn storytelling. And so all of that had to be in place in just a few weeks. It was a lot, but at Nest's urging, we documented what we did so that it can be used as a template for others, such as yourselves, if you'd like to try running a program like this or thinking about it. However, there are very essential ingredients that really can't be packaged, like just like the excellent story coaching that the kids received. There are things that are essential but not often thought of, such as where's the money for the program going to come from, and how exactly are we going to find these kids? That's why I'm here to tell you, if you're thinking about running your own program, even if you are working with an entity such as a school or a youth organization that already has kids available and offer some funding, you're still going to need a person who can offer administrative help and keep in touch with people. The communication is totally necessary to be budgeted for and planned for. It could be a story coach from the program, such as Nicolette, or somebody who's not going to be a story coach, such as myself. But in either case, they're going to be doing necessary work that is above the story coaching, the work with the kids. To give you an example of what Nicolette and I did together, most of the seed funding did come from Nest, but then we were each charged with finding some money on our own. So we did that. And then we reached out to many contacts that we already had in our areas, organizations, congregations, schools, agencies, friends, And the multi-step process of securing funding and recruiting students often involves building relationships and inspiring confidence over time. Gert Johnson, who I started Children at the Well with, taught me that it really is about the relationships. In our area, the Seymour Fox Memorial Foundation kindly stepped up to offer the additional funding that we needed. And after multiple phone calls and emails and a few trainings on racism awareness conducted over Zoom, the Schenectady School District, the Hindu Temple of Schenectady, and the An-Noor Islamic School sent us wonderful young participants. And Nicolette worked with her channels in Massachusetts and found some others. Then the fun could begin, such as collecting letters from participants, gathering contact information, getting to know the kids and their parents, checking students' internet and devices for Zooming, getting photo releases, coaching agreements, dividing students into groups, and organizing an informational meeting for parents and students. Once the coaching sessions were underway, there were notices to be sent on a regular basis, absences to follow up on, ongoing conversations, some story research, some program promotion. For one group, it became necessary to recruit some tech helpers because of the unfamiliarity with Zoom. And we met with the Nest folks. We had a couple of staff meetings. We organized the final event. I created certificates of completion for the kids and mailed them out with some other mementos. And for this pilot effort, we did, Nicolette and I combed through all the Zoom recordings we had to aid in the creation of the video you saw. And we were also invited to organize this presentation for you. That will most likely not be necessary in future FLY programs, but there's always some promotion that needs to get done. So it was a lot of fun paddling those duck feet and propelling the FLY program along. Now I'm going to turn to the story coaches, and we have 2 participants here with us today. And I'm going to ask them to give you their perspective of how it was to be part of the FLY program. Start with Marni. So Marni, 12 weeks is a long time to keep a group together. Can you expand on how you and Ayah managed to build community in your group?
I can. Well, right from day one, my beloved Ayah Osman, 18 years old now, co-coach, who has been my friend since she was about a 7-year-old, I think, and coming to Children at the Well with her older brothers. We talked about how do we help them to know the power of story for you as your self-telling, but also how story affects people. And we, right from the beginning, said, how do you believe we'll grow together as a group? And the girls had answers. Now, I will tell you, our group was sort of 13, 14-year-olds. And from all over, they didn't all know each other, but we got to know each other. They said, honesty. We have to be honest with each other. And we said, absolutely, absolutely. And somebody said, we have to be true to who we are. Yes, that's about finding your voice and knowing how to be yourself, your best self in the world. And we want to gain confidence, they said. We want to gain confidence. And I said, well, you know, Children at the Well, for many, many, many years that I've worked with them, our bottom line was working through appreciations of every single telling you do, so that we're saying, oh, I love that moment. I love the way you went into your mother's voice. Or, oh, I could see you becoming that old witch, or whatever. We were naming what brought the story to life for each of us as we listened. So of course, it meant deep listening. You couldn't be sitting there thinking about your own story. And what am I going to do later? Oh, I got to do my story. No, listening was so, so important. And we were a group that did bond really well. And we were there listening and appreciating and encouraging. And each time we gave an appreciation, we realized, oh, maybe that's something I can try too. So it wasn't just about talking to each other about their stories, but thinking all the time of how will I go about making my story alive? So that kind of thing, it just bonded us very, very well. I'll tell you one other little tip that has always been important for me in storytelling. My first big teacher taught me, think about the most important thing that you believe your story is about. And you can find that by asking, what do I love about the story? Or why am I telling this story? Or what's a message I want to give to the world through my story, without preaching, but through my story, I want the world to take something away. And so when we talked about MIT, we called it MIT, the most important thing. We also talked about what's important to us in our lives. What's our MIT? And that was a wonderful discussion that very first day. And at the end of every session, we talked about, we made sure we'd save time for, what did you like today? What did you like most of today's class? And what did you learn that you're taking away from this class? What's the thing you most learned? And you want to take that away and work with that as you work on your stories at home. So I would say that is what helped us to care about each other. As we cared about each other and wanted each other to succeed and wanted to succeed, that was what brought us and kept us together right through the end.
Yeah, I'd really have to agree. They seem so simple. What did you like and what did you learn? And the appreciations, but they really did work to bond. Saw that. Ayah, working with Marni, your group were all older girls. Some knew each other, and you came from this community. Was there ever an issue with the other participants not feeling included? How did you manage it?
So the group that Marni and I worked with, we had 5 older girls, and 3 of those girls were from a local Islamic school. And then our 2 remaining girls, we had 1 girl that had come from the Schenectady School District, which was also local to the upstate New York area. And then we had another student that was all the way in Massachusetts. So I actually went to the same Islamic school that 3 of our girls went to. And Marni and I, we've worked in and around the Schenectady School District, never directly with that student, but we've had those experiences. And thankfully, we never really ran into the issue where one of our girls felt like she wasn't included or she didn't fit, but it isn't something that just happened. It's something that Marni and I definitely had to work for and work towards and put a lot of effort into. We had to be as proactive as possible. It was really important that we kind of emphasized unity and teamwork, which Marni just, spoke on and touched upon. It was important for them to recognize that we were a storytelling family, but by no means does that mean, that we're asking the girls to shed their individuality or leave behind their identities and kind of conform to this group setting. We really wanted our girls to trust one another, again, something that Marni really touched upon, and it's something that the girls themselves really wanted and really emphasized from the very beginning. So having the girls really get to know one another was a big part of that. And we really had to develop a really safe, comfortable learning environment for them. And we didn't really expect that when the girls, got to know each other, they were gonna realize, oh my God, we have so much in common, and kind of bond that way. And as easy as that would have been for that kind of instant bond over just all of these shared attributes in their lives, I think it's so much more beautiful and also just so much more representative of our program and our mission when something quite different happens. Our girls came together and realized that they were very different people who came from very different walks of life and had different cultures and practiced different religions and participated in different activities. And yet they were able to form that bond over their differences. And I think that that's really beautiful. Our girls learn to appreciate their differences, to understand their individuality, and forming a bond that way was really one of the ways that Marni and I were able to tend to our group with so much care and have them tend to one another with so much care. So yeah, that's, I think, what I would say in terms of making sure that everyone felt like they were included and they were a part of our little family. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that good explanation. Andrea, in your group, the kids were younger, and none of them knew each other prior to meeting on Zoom. How did you get them to open up? How did knowing their interests help you coach them?
But it was very exciting having the younger group, and it was a little bit of a challenge because we needed to find out some tools. So Nicolette and I decided that one of the things we would always do is have an icebreaker. And icebreakers tell you so many things. Icebreakers tell you the energy of the child or the speaker. It tells you if they are a little bit reticent sharing or if they are enthusiastic. It also tells you a little bit about how they perceive themselves and how they think others perceive them. So an icebreaker is a great tool to use when you're trying to draw people together, especially with the kids. We also used prompts. We were really careful about what prompts that we had. We had that moment when. I remember some stories coming from that moment when Nuala and I, Maeve, were going to name the goats. They live on a farm and they were newborn goats. That moment when Payetson thought, I need to get to an appointment, and I totally lost the email. So those little bits and prompts really informed us of who they were and what they liked and their interest. Payetson came out that he loved plays. Maeve came out and she loved writing. And that really intertwined and wove in with the whole group because everyone had some common interest. And especially with storytelling, you are the actor, you are the scene, you are the dialogue. It's and with writing is the same. So people started to find out what they had in common, and they began to interact. Now, one thing I would say to everyone that is going to do one of these, be proficient with breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are a way to create intimacy with a group. So we would look and see what the energy of the group was and the individuals, and we would do breakout rooms for telling to each other stories. And that little piece of breaking out into a room together started to form bonds. And they had commonalities, and they would try to write things in the chat just to each other, which was a lot of fun too, because a lot of times they were giving appreciations. And as Marni said, appreciations, which Jay, I know you're here, I learned, and many of us have learned from you, and appreciations for each other's work is really putting a value. I really loved what you said about this, or your facial expression was so inquisitive, it drew me right in. That means that someone else is trying to tell you what's working in your story, and it's so beautiful when you hear and take that in, and you can say, oh, my peer, this person loved this part of his story. It values what you're doing. I could go on, but I know that there are many more questions, and I have a lot of ways that they connected. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Paula, because I'm a storyteller and I could go on and on and on.
Lamia, how was it meeting new kids in the FLY program?
It was so good to meet like different kind of people from like different places, and I like to like meet for different people. When I meet someone different, I learn different things like about them, where they live and how they like talk with people. It helps me a lot when I talk with people. I communicate with the people.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. How about you, Maeve? How do you like meeting new kids in the FLY program?
I think it's just like an opportunity to share your stories and like learn the hearts of people and storytelling and share ideas and just help each other with things, like help each other with getting your story better and making good friends and just like connecting.
Thank you. Lamia, what's one thing you learned about storytelling from being in FLY?
I learned how to communicate with different peoples, because like I'm not that kind of like communicating with different people. I'm like, I wasn't really like to communicate with people because I feel like so weird when I communicate, because I don't have like proper English like to communicate really. But now when I in this FLY program, when I meet, I can like, I'm so brave to talk with people.
Wonderful. Yeah. I give you so much credit for what you do, you know, as an English language learner. It's fabulous. Thank you. Nicolette, is there a set structure or guidelines or lesson plan? How did you work with that structure with your co-coach?
So a tip for anybody in any walk of life is, if you've been asked to do something, go and find people who are better than you are. And so we were very fortunate with Marni and Ayah and Andrea, who are all stellar and have had a lot of experience working with kids to develop both the personal narrative and the traditional tales that we had hoped to develop in this program. And so it was very much a group effort, and we started at the top level. You know, what are our objectives in this program? What do we want to see as the end results? And we really agreed, and so we initially agreed that we would start with the personal narrative, with the life tales. And then, you know, the big question was, how are we going to transition from life tales to traditional tales? And we wanted to have our team players do their own research and not, you know, feed them something based on their interests and the values that they had expressed in their personal discussions. And, you know, we brainstormed all the time. And then when we were in partners, so with my co-coach, Andrea, I would say easily, we had, so by the time we sort of had our sort of partners, we had an overview of how each week would look and what the goals are for the week, so that we would all, so that both teams, we had sort of two teams, both teams would be on the same schedule and reach the same end point. Then with my co-coach, we met once a week and put in over an hour of time planning the activities. And a lot of it was based on, what this was a new, platform, and, assessing, were we engaging the kids, and what worked, what didn't work. We wanted to make sure that we established a routine to our meetings. We wanted to make sure that, that end part of reflection was always there. As Andrea mentioned, we pre-planned, the breakout rooms, and then on the fly realized that dynamics were different, and through sort of furious chat box, we were able to change things up, so that by the end, one of my responsibilities was to continually document what was happening. Marni kept copious notes, and by the end, the challenge has been to take what has happened in 2 of our groups and put it into a comprehensive sort of outline guide, so that we can continue this FLY program, and it can have sort of the same format. I think the goals, the objectives are always going to stay the same.
Thank you. So I'll ask Lamia if you can answer that question. What's one thing you learned about storytelling from being in FLY?
As I said, I learned how to speak better in English and communicate with people in different words.
Lamia, I'm going to ask, because I know your story. So were there any specifics about your story that you learned new things in the translation?
When I learned that first when I listened to this story, when I was telling to my sister about the woodcutter, and that time I just know different name for it, but now I know exact name, but woodcutter. So after I hear that story, I learned that word.
Super. Maeve, so you can answer that now. What's one thing you learned about storytelling from being in FLY?
I learned how to tell a story, tell a story what you feel inside of you, the kind of story, match up stories, what you are inside means you can, you have a choice to pick a story that kind of, it's like a puzzle piece and matches right into your puzzle. And I also learned how to communicate with stories from people's hearts, how they told the story, and how you could communicate with storytelling. It was just such a fun experience for me to see other people's stories, just like other people's stories matching with yours, and see how you could work together and find a story that you you could talk about the stories and stuff. So that was just such a fun experience for me.
Wow, thank you. Ayah, you participated in Children at the Well as a student and a coach, but I also know you as a spoken word artist. And your work addresses how you found your voice as a woman of color. How did you use this strength to stimulate discussion in the FLY group, both in relation to developing personal stories, but also the importance of traditional tales?
So 4/5 of the girls that we worked with were women of color, and I was a storyteller. I still consider myself to be a storyteller, and I was in Children at the Well growing up, and eventually, that program really led me to be able to find my voice, and then I chose that I wanted to use that voice for spoken word. And so it was really important when Marni and I came into the program and started working with the girls that we really emphasized that this was an opportunity for the girls to find their voices and to use their voices not only to empower themselves as young women of color or young women in general, but to empower their communities, to empower people in their communities who may not have the same opportunity to work with professional storytellers and to develop these stories and to learn all of these things. And people that don't have access to these opportunities, they have access to these opportunities. So they can be a voice and they, can be a guiding light for people in their communities. So that was really important for us to help the girls realize that. And Marni and I definitely emphasized that we encouraged the girls, if they wanted to tell stories about their personal experiences with race, their personal experiences with gender, being women of color, walking throughout the world, we wanted them to know that we would support them if they wanted to share those stories, that we would help them develop these stories. And Marni and I also implemented that in terms of traditional stories. So we wanted them to tell stories from their cultures, and we wanted them to recognize and to embrace how beautiful and unique and diverse their cultures could be and were. So that was definitely really important for us. And Marni and I definitely also emphasized that oftentimes this Eurocentric view of history, this Eurocentric view of storytelling, we're often led to believe that it was the ancient Greeks that started the art of storytelling, when in reality it was indigenous groups, varying indigenous groups and Aboriginal groups around the world that started oral storytelling and that tradition. And so we wanted the girls to know that this was part of who they were, and they had every right to reclaim that and to tell their stories and to use their stories not only for themselves, but for the people in their communities that might not have the same chances that they were given.
Wow, I didn't realize some of that. Really empowering, thanks. Nicolette, you worked with personal story as well. How did you know when a child felt uncomfortable? As sometimes that's hard to see through a computer screen.
Yeah. Before I answer that question, I just want to say that having Ayah be part of our coaching mentoring team was such an asset. I've been doing this for years, and having someone who was young, having a woman of color, and listening to her viewpoint, listening to her experiences, I feel like this was really an important element of the program and for its continuing success. That being said, being on the virtual platform, as I know I'm preaching to the choir here, the technology has its frustrations in just trying to come up to speed and making buttons work and making sure you're not muted and all of that stuff. But, we are all missing not being with each other. As fantastic as it is that that we can connect kids from, Schenectady and the Greater Lawrence area, it's just, frustrating not to be in the same room as all the tellers together, all the team together. And one aspect is that when you're talking about personal stories, when you're in the same room, you can feel someone's discomfort much easier than you can on a Zoom screen. Sometimes you have to wait for them to turn the video off, and then you're like, oh, something happened there. I didn't quite catch it. And in our instance, that's where I think that it was great to have two mentors, two of these coaches, two of us being able to, one might be able to interact, and one is, the eyes and trying to listen for reactions. And we had a situation where, responding to, I think it was a sensory visualization, we had a student who had been a refugee talk about an amazing marketplace experience in a city, and they got lost and had to find their way out. And, it was in another country, and just the scene, it was just coming alive. And Andrea and I both perked up and thought, it can be a great story. But then as we began to sort of ask him some more details, try and make it not just that one sensory visualization, but to create a story, he began backing down and saying things like, I don't remember. Or, we would try and lead him maybe someplace and say, well, yeah, that was it, without really committing to it. And so then again, Andrea and I had to resort to chat and say, let's have that person tell about a story that happened here in America. I think ended up racing bikes in the park because that was what they were more comfortable with. So that is something that you really have to be sensitive on this virtual platform in order not to scare someone away, especially someone who's so young and impressionable.
Marni, what are the particular ways you honor the kids' creativity?
Really, the whole thing of storytelling is about being creative in that you're seeing a world that's inside you. If you like that story, you're building that world inside you, the way you kind of hold on to it. But at the same time, you've got to enter that world, and you've got to enter it with your body and your face and your voice. I want to say about Lamia that she beautifully represented the learning of how to do that. I love that she said, just learning woodcutter. Well, what is a woodcutter? Because she's got a woodcutter in her story. But as she entered her story with her own love of it, she saw how to become a character very different from herself. She was a character very like herself, talking with the brother in the story. I'm scared, or I want you to help me find my way. And I was amazed at all these different aspects of herself that came through. Now we had another girl that was a writer. And because she was a writer and she wrote a very, very powerful story about a dark moment in her life, she wanted to read it. And I'm lovingly trying to say, we're in a world of the oral. We're trying to take those things. You see that, you wrote it because you can remember it in your mind, and see if you can let yourself talk it to us, because written language and storytelling is really, it's different. It's a different feel to it. It's kind of like the difference between listening to somebody recite a poem that's a very formal poem, or spoken word like Ayah does, which is poet language, but it's also very real and very alive. So I tried to honor her as a writer, and we worked a lot back and forth about that. But I think it was actually the darkness of the story that made her step away from wanting to tell it. And in the end, she wrote another very beautiful story. And it really was in a language of telling when she ended the season with us in the final event. It wasn't so scary. It was more about a joy and a friendship. And yet it did touch on the same kind of conflict that was in the early story, which was about kids getting shot in schools. And I learned a lot from that experience of working with her as a writer and seeing how important writing was to her. And yet I knew that storytelling voice was there, and she found it. Yeah. We drew our stories. Some days we drew them to help us see them in new ways. And I know I've often found a lot of luck myself when I'm even just wanting to keep a complex story clear in my mind of the events that happen, that drawing is a way to do that. Sometimes it's storyboarding, but sometimes it's actually just walking your way through images, or thinking about sensory images, which you can't always draw, like smell or taste or cold, but we worked on those sensory things too. And I think that brought out the character of, or the quality of creativity in pretty much everybody. Yeah.
Andrea, with your younger group, what specific things did you do to keep the kids engaged?
So I think I'm about tools and things. I think that using games, and often the games came up in the moment. We were working on character, you remember that, Nicolette? And we needed them to create voices. And I thought, you know, if you get a hat, sometimes you take on a character. So we had a session called Grab a Hat, and we all came on with different hats. And everybody was encouraged to use the inspiration of the hat to find a voice to tell your story and use some of the characters from their story. We went from the life tales to the folk tales. And I think that they learned that some of the characters from their life experience were translated into a folk tale. And that came out in the hats. You know, a mother's voice, did you clean your room? Or it's a sister or sibling's voice. And then Nicolette had a game with the five senses, I think it was, that you pulled a piece out, a card out of a box, and they had a lot of fun with that. It was a treasure hunt. And there was a lack of emotion sometimes, and that if you're doing Zoom, you find that that can be true with storytelling. I'm doing a lot of coaching and teaching, and I am searching for ways that people will find emotions. So we came up with this game, and that was tell your story without words, and you have to use your facial expressions and your body language to be able to tell your story. And we knew the story, so it was really a lot of fun to watch what was unfolding. And what was unfolding was an exaggeration of emotions because they couldn't tell it. And then we had the person that was listening tell the story that was just told, how they heard it, which was a little bit different because there were no words, and they even exaggerated even more. But it translated into the story, and it made for a very amusing and fun exercise, but also a workable piece that you could use in your stories with the folk tales. What else do we do? Oh, we used the poll, and I don't know if ever anyone has used the poll, but it's also a way to engage. It's if you're a host of a Zoom meeting, you have the opportunity to use polls. The one thing I would say with the polls is that you can only ask one question. I found this out, Nicolette and I did, when we were running a Zoom. If you try to do a second one with different questions, it does not come up. But if you ask one question that is generic, the answers can be different. And it was a way to sort of think and then have a something to engage with online. And that was a lot of fun too. I noticed that through the games, the students gained a lot of confidence and a lot of expression. And speaking of confidence, it is my pleasure to introduce our new young teller. Maeve Breen came to us, and she had enthusiasm, and she would listen deeply to what we say, and then she was able to apply it to her stories. And she has a natural ability to tell stories, which we all are excited about. And when you hear her, you'll say, that girl, she's got talent. She's a storyteller. In fact, one of the sessions that we had, we asked her, what do you want to do when you grow up? She said, well, I want to be a storyteller. So I present to you Maeve Breen, the up and coming storyteller, and she's going to be telling the fairy path. Maeve.
A long time ago, when humans had to look out for tricksy fairies called the Shee, there lived a teeny little fairy in a backyard of an Irish cottage. And it was an early spring morning. There were bees buzzing, flowers blooming, a pretty smell all around. Everything was blooming. There were teeny little creatures crawling in the grass. You could hear bells tinkling off in the distance from cows' necks. There lived a little fairy, and her name was Saoirse. Now, Saoirse loved flowers, and she lived in the stalk of a lilac bush. The stalk was about this wide, and she was about that tall. And one early spring morning, she heard something from inside the cottage, so she fluttered up to the windowsill and peeked into the window, and she heard some crying coming inside. She looked in. She saw a teeny little baby wrapped up in a mother's arms, and she thought, "Well, that is some beautiful baby I see." And the months went by, and little Saoirse would always come to the window, and she'd look in to see how the baby started to grow. And she started to grow bigger and bigger till she was a very little girl, and her name was Mary. Now, Mary loved to play. She would play with flowers. She would play in the grass. She would build snowmen. She would have so much fun. And one early summer morning, she heard something whispering. So she listened as hard as she could, and she could hear, "Don't build a house on a fairy path." And she thought, "That's kind of crazy. My head's making stuff up." But she's like, "Okay, if my head says it, well, I'm kind of being a little silly." So she went back to her game. And then a few months later, she heard it again. "Don't build your house on a fairy path." And she was thinking, "Why am I hearing voices? This is very strange." So years went by, and Mary grew older. And one day, she got married to Thomas. And they were planning to build a house. And she said, "Well, Thomas, I heard that very bad things happen near fairy paths, so let's not build near there." And he was like, "Come on, those are just silly fairy tales." She's like, "Please, listen." And the days went by, and they started planning more about the house. The neighbors would say right next door, "Can't build a house on a fairy path. Bad things will happen." And he was like, "No, they won't. It's just fairy tales. That's never gonna happen." So they built their house on a fairy path. And the day they finished, they moved right in. And the first night, they heard tapping on the glass. Tippity-tap, 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 tippity-tap. And Mary said, "Thomas, Thomas, there's something on the window. Go check." So Thomas got up and went over to the window, but there was nothing there. And he said, "I built this house big, strong, with a good roof on it, and there's nothing going to hurt us inside." So they went to bed. The next night, they heard thumping on the roof. Thump, 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 thump. So Mary said, "Thomas, Thomas, there's something on the roof. Go check." So Thomas got up, and again he went and checked. But there was nothing there. And he said, "I built this house big, strong, with a good roof on, and there's nothing going to hurt us inside." And so they went back to bed. The next night, they woke up. The walls started shaking. There was tapping on the glass. Tippity-tap, tippity-tap, tippity-tap. There was thumping on the roof. Thump, 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 thump. And this time they were pretty creeped out. I mean, I'd be pretty creeped out if that was my house. And so they got up. Thomas lit a candle, and they got out of bed, and they walked over to the door. Creak, 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 creak. And they opened it up. And there, with his arms crossed, scowling, in midair, sat the king of the Sidhe. Now, he looked pretty mad, and they were pretty afraid. You could see all behind him dotted faces peeking out and whispering to each other. They were all staring at the house. Right next to him sat Saoirse on a lilac bush. And she said, "Come here, come here." So he leaned over and they whispered for a few seconds. And Saoirse said, "Well, I've known Mary all her life, since she was a very little baby. And I trust she would choose the best for Thomas and herself. And she tried her best." And Mary said, "Thank you, Saoirse. We promise we'll move out in the morning." And Thomas said, Yes, we shall move out in the morning. Just let us sleep for tonight." So they parted, going different ways. The Sidhe went into the forest to dance around a fairy ring. And they went back. Thomas and Mary went back inside. And they went to bed, and there was no noise. They woke up the next morning, and Thomas called over some friends, and they started taking down the house and rebuilding it somewhere else. And Mary made a delicious lunch of sandwiches, lemonade, and cookies. And they built their house over by the side on the hill. It wasn't on the fairy path this time. And every once in a while, Mary would go out. She would go out for a picnic. And if she listened hard enough, she could hear a little voice whispering from the lilac plants.
Thank you.
Oh, beautiful, Maeve.
Oh. Yes, Maeve, fabulous.
Don't we all want a fairy like that?
Yay! Yay! Yes! Wonderful. Thank you for that beautiful story. I loved it. Did you write it yourself?
It was a story, but I kind of flipped it around and played with it for a little bit.
So our next teller this afternoon is Lemia El Musa. She will be telling the story of a young girl and her brother who must use wit and courage to protect one another. Marni and I had the absolute honor to coach Lemia, and much like the young girl on the story, we've had the opportunity to see her develop and grow. Without further ado, Hansel and Gretel by Lemia.
My story is about Hansel and Gretel. Once time ago, there was a woodcutter. He had 2 kids, Hansel and Gretel. Those kids has a stepmother. Their stepmother doesn't like the kids a lot because she came from a rich family to the poor family. And one night, the kids was sleeping. The stepmother came to the father, told him that we're going to be starved this winter. You have to get rid of those kids. The dad said, "No, I cannot do that. They're my kids." The stepmother, she talked until the father accepted. The father says, "Okay, we're going to put them." But Hansel was hearing all what their parent was talking about. And then Hansel went out to collect some sparkle pebbles. He collected some sparkle pebbles in his backpack. In the morning, when his mom and his stepmom and his father came and told them, "Let's go, kids, we're going to do a picnic in the forest." The kids accepted. They went deep over the forest. And his dad and stepmother says, "You guys stay here under the tree. We're going to collect some wood so we can do a fire." And then the kid says they accepted again. And then the mother and stepmother and the father went. It was like getting darker. No one came, no one didn't go. The kids was really scared. And Gretel says, "Oh, brother, where is my father? He didn't come yet. I'm really scared." His brother says, "Don't worry, Gretel. We can go home by ourselves. I put some sparkles pebbles on the floor." And then they traced the pebbles until to their home. When they went to the home, they see their dad. She ran to his dad. Dad, why did you leave us there? I really miss you. Don't do that again. I'm really scared when you do that. And his dad says, "Oh dear, my daughter, I'm really sorry. I'm never going to do that again." And then the stepmother really get angry. Says, "Oh, those kids came back again. I hit them really bad. Why they came again?" And then after 3 days, the father had to go to the village. And then the stepmother says, "Oh yeah, this is my time to get rid of those kids." And then in the morning, she came, and when the dad left, she came and told to the kids, "Dear kids, let's go to the picnic. We're going to do a picnic in the forest." But Hansel didn't believe her stepmother. He immediately grabbed a bread on the table. He took it and he put it inside his backpack. And then they went to the forest. And then his stepmother said, "I'm going to collect some woods. You guys sit here." And then when she left, the Gretel waits with his brother. And the Gretel asks his brother, "She's not going to come. Why did we come with her to here? I want to go to home. It's getting dark. I'm really scared, brother." And his brother says, "Don't worry. I put a piece of the bread in the way to here." And then he says, "Dad, let's go now." His brother says, "We cannot go now. It's so dark out, and we cannot see the breads and the piece of the bread in the floor." And then they went, and they're sitting there under the tree. And then in the morning, they went to try find of the piece of the bread that they put in the way, but they couldn't find it. Gretel says, "Where is it? You told me that you put a piece of the bread. Now I cannot see them." His brother says, "Oh no, it might be birds and mice might be eating them." And then they start finding their way to home. They walk, but they couldn't find it. After they walk for several hours, they find a gingerbread, a candy house, and then with the donuts, with candies it was making with. And then when the Gretel sees that, she says, "Oh brother, look at that, a ginger house. I'm really hungry. Can I go eat some?" His brother says, "Yeah, let's go eat some." And they start eating until the witch comes out. She says, "Oh dear children, what you doing here? It looks like you're so hungry. Come in, let me feed you inside." And then the kids went in, and then the witch gave them chocolate milk. They start drinking. The witch says, drink as much as you want. There's plenty of it." And then the kids was full. They want to go to home. When they says, "We want to go home. Can you help us to find our way to home?" The witch says, "No way that you guys going to go home. You eat from my gingerbread house, and then I feed you. You cannot leave me and go." And then the kids was trying to run away, but the door was closed, and the windows were shut, and they was trapped in the house. And then the witch came to take the Hansel inside the cage. And then when she put the Hansel in the cage, she told Gretel, "You're going to help me as a slave. You're going to clean, you're going to cook, you're going to wash." And then the Gretel was really sad. And then every time the witch came to the Hansel to check if the Hansel get fattened or not. And the witch gives to the Hansel a meat. And then one time when the witch came to Hansel, says, "Give me your finger." And then the Hansel knew that witch cannot see that well. And then he took the chicken bone, and then he hold it like that. And then when the witch holds his finger, he says, "Oh, you're too skinny. How am I going to eat you?" It waits for a few days. But the witch was really hungry, and one morning she says to Gretel, she said, "Gretel, come here. boil a big pot of water. I'm going to eat your brother as a soup. The Gretel says, oh no, she's going to eat her brother. But while she was trying to find out how to get rid of the witch to help his brother, she was putting the big pot of the water on the stove. And then the witch came out. She says, oh, did it boiled or is still boiling? The Gretel says, I don't know. I cannot reach. I cannot see it. And then the witch says, okay, don't worry. I will check it. She started climbing on the stove, and then she climbs on the top of the big pot. When she looked inside the water, Gretel thinks, oh, I can push her now. She immediately pushed the witch inside the water, in the hot water, and then she closed the lid of it, and then she says, oh yes, I get rid of her. And then she ran to take his brother out of the cage. She asked his brother from the cage. Then his brother says, look at that corner. There's the coins in there. When they went to see, they get the coins as much as they can with them. They fill their pockets, they fill their hands, and they fill their clothes with them. And then they try to find their house. They walk until they find their house. When they go in front of the house, they see their dad was really sad, and he was sitting sadly. And then the Gretel and Hansel run to their dad. Dad, we miss you, we really miss you. The Gretel start explaining, Dad, do you know I pushed a witch? She was going to eat my brother. And then his father says, oh, my dear daughter, don't worry. She's never going to come close of you. I'm here. And even your stepmother is not here anymore. I kicked her out from the house. She's never going to come and touch you again. And they live happily. They could be having food with that gold.
Wow.
Oh,
I love your
fabulous.
voices,
That's a great
Lamia.
job. Good for you.
Fantastic.
That was wonderful.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you, Lamia, and thank you, Maeve. Wonderful. I didn't know how you could do it. You've picked up your stories and presented them so wonderfully, even added more things. It's been several months since our last performance. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to turn things over to Nicolette right now for her to wrap up.
Wow. Can you imagine working with more of these fabulous children and getting these results? And I have to tell you that both Maeve and Lamia, since the showcase that we did in August, have even obviously been mulling over and thinking about these stories and have made some parts more concise and have added and embellished their voices. It's so wonderful. And I'm going to start with sort of the big picture that I know that what we would like to do with all these enthusiastic tellers who are now, well-versed in storytelling is like Northeast Storytelling has the World Virtual Storytelling Guild, WVSG. They would love to have a guild sort of monitored by an adult, but for the youth to come together and keep sharing stories. Maeve knows more about fairies than most storytellers I know, and I know she would love to have a place to practice more of her fairy stories. But how to get there? That's the big problem. That's a big challenge. We have to keep Fly going, and we have done this in a very organized way. We have done this with a lot of documenting, and anyone familiar with network marketing, that's sort of the plan that we have with this, that we want new storytellers to join with existing coaches and mentors and create a new virtual program. We want to keep the age group 10 to 14. We want to keep combining children from different geographical locations. It's very, very important that we include, have a lot of diversity in religion and skin color, socioeconomic areas. And we need to continue to get funding in order to do this. If you are out there and you are employed or connected with a youth organization or school, these, the program checks off so many boxes about what we're hoping to develop in our youth, from curriculum goals in English language to developing, leadership qualities, as was mentioned in our video. But the best thing, as we storytellers know, that happened, and it happened virtually, which we were all surprised about, is the connection that these young people made with each other. So much so that after we had our showcase, that was like the finale of the program, we got emails from our team members saying, wait, was that it? There's no more? And we had to organize another getting together. We had a big get together of both groups where they could get together and keep sharing. And there were so many connections that were made and that will continue to be made, that the prospect of keeping, multiplying this and multiplying this, the rewards are just going to be immense. So we're happy now to answer any of your questions on the process to date, the process going forward. If you have a question, unmute yourself or put it in the chat box.
Nicolette,
Yes.
one question that Gail Herman had was did they do the no word telling in breakouts?
So
or with
Andrea
the 5
can jump
students
in
all
here
at
too,
once?
but
I
we
think
did
we
it
just wanted
both
a little
ways.
sense of how that
So
worked.
we
procedure
sometimes,
point
as
of view.
Andrea mentioned, the kids were more apt to open up a little bit more and be a little looser in a breakout room with one or two people in the 2 or 3 people in the breakout room, 1 or 2 people listening, and each breakout room would have one of the mentors there as well. But there was always someone who was a little bolder and would sort of initiate it by being sort of a volunteer and trying it out with everybody, and just again giving people confidence. And then we said, well, we go into breakout rooms and see how it works, and that again instilled more confidence. And so when we came back, that's when we had the real fun. And that's when someone told someone else's story with no words, and you had to figure out what the story was, because half of us hadn't really seen what was going on. It was a lot of fun.
Nicolette, we have another question from Muriel Horowitz, who asks, how can we get involved?
So reach out to Nest, reach out to Deb Rowe at Nest. This was a pilot program. As you know, as teachers, as storytellers, that you can't do something one time and say, okay, that's it, I've perfected this now. So we're looking, to grow the program in increments, and looking for people who are not only talented tellers and enrichment teachers, but who have some resources that can help us. So yeah, please contact Deb Rowe.
And I think that Nest will want to provide some initial funding. I think that there were sort of 3 probably important things. a storyteller who is willing to be trained by one of by Nicolette or Marni or Andrea to become a mentor, and then who would have access to a group of children, whether it's from a school or a library or a youth organization, where they can find a cohort of kids to work that with, and then the commitment to being part of working with them on their stories. But you can see that really magic does happen. So
yeah, I wanted to add also Ayah Osman, if she has time, being a college student now. She might not, but to continue.
I was just going to say, Ben asked if any of the stories from the youth storytellers are available online. He'd love to have his second grade class see and hear young people tell.
Yes, we do. Jim Brule sectioned out each individual story, so we have those available, and we'll have to see about making them available online.
Yeah. Or at least, if not online, at least a way we can get them to, a school to hear them, yeah.
Yeah. Also, I mean, what a valuable thing for the students to have. They each have now their own story recorded that they can bring to an organization or a class that they're involved in and share.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know anybody who might be interested in that, the video is available for you to show to an organizations or to share with other storytellers who might be, or funders who might be interested in the program. So, there's a way of using that video yourselves. We can make that available. I think it'll probably wind up on our website. Will it, Deb? Am I right? Yes. Okay. I'm seeing yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it will, for sure.
Karen Golden, did you?
Yes, I had a question. So this was really great. I am wondering, how many kids did you have in each session? How many kids were at a time, like in each Zoom session?
We were aiming to have 20, to have 10 kids work with 2 coaches and 10 kids work with 2. But because of the time frame and craziness of the spring and COVID and all that, we ended up, I think we started out with 12 and split them up between the 2 groups. Does that answer?
I actually have another question as well, and it has to do with funding. I'm wondering if the kids paid for their sessions with you, or was it entirely funded through grants or gifts or?
Yeah, I think one of the things that Nest wants to make sure of is that it's free to the kids. So the funding would come from outside organizations, cultural councils or something. But yeah, for the kids, it's free.
That's part of like what Paula touched on to begin with. So, creating this program, begins months in advance and doing the recruiting and the fundraising.
Right. I mean, there obviously there's work that needs to be done, and somebody who would need to either coordinate it or to hire somebody to coordinate it, find somebody to coordinate it. But for the children themselves, the program is free. All of you who put it together and made this happen, it's very exciting to us at Nest. We're just thrilled with it.
Lynn, thank you for your leadership and everything.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks to Deb too. I mean, she was like a real spearheader of this. So, and thanks to Elsa from, Elsa, who provided the money that gave us what are we going to do with this money? What kind of wonderful thing can we do? So, I mean, it was one of those things where the idea came from having money as opposed to, here we have a great idea, let's find the money. So it was, an interesting way to have something unfold.
Did we have Elsa with us today?
No, she is not with us today, unfortunately. She couldn't be with us today.
Okay.
super crazy at Google. She's like insane right now. So yeah. But we did
send her the video, and she was just thrilled with how the program turned out. So
one of the things that like I love about storytelling is like getting to see everybody else and how we can all work together and tell stories and share thoughts about like how we've been doing. And like I think Zoom storytelling is a good way to meet people like you never would have met before, like people that are very far from where you are. I just think it's a great thing that we did this and everybody came together and did this on Zoom so we could see people we never would have met if we didn't do this.
That's wonderful, Maeve. Thank you very much. That is very important. Thanks for pointing that out.
I want to notice that we have another one of our students with us here, Ayah. Young Ayah sneaking in. I can't unmute you, but you could unmute yourself if you would just want to introduce yourself and say something you learned.
I really enjoyed being in Fly program, and I really liked the storytelling. I had like I learned like how to be confident a lot in myself from this program. I also like met new people and I also learned like how to tell stories in like a way where like if those who ever like listen to the story, they like get to like imagine the story, and I learned also how to give appreciation. I love this like program very much.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Oh, I was so happy to see you. Yeah.
And you told a wonderful story at the showcase too. I remember how wonderful your story was. I'm so glad you joined us today.
Any other comments, questions for the panelists? I guess it's a wrap. It was a wonderful.
Right on time. That's the way we're so organized. Thank you all for coming and listening, and we look forward to more discussions and moving forward with this program.
Yeah, and please reach out to Deborah or to me if you have any other questions or thoughts or are interested in exploring how you might do a program in your own community.